All set. My name is Ed Nardi, Chair of the Natural Resources Commission, and I'm calling this public meeting to order at 7 p.m. Tonight's NRC meeting will be a hybrid in-person and Zoom meeting. We have a microphone set up on the commission table, and plans will be projected through the TV monitor. If you are presenting via Zoom, please turn on your audio and microphone when it is time for you to speak. Following the presentation by the petitioner and questions from the commission, members of the public will have the opportunity to ask questions and provide public comment. Please identify yourself with your name and address for the record. You can also raise your hand from your phone by dialing *9 and use *6 to unmute. All video screens will be turned off with the exception of the commissioners, Delia, and the current petitioner. Once the commission has acted on an application, the petitioner is free to leave the meeting. In the event of any technical difficulties, all matters on the agenda that have not been heard will automatically be continued to the May 4th NRC meeting. At this time, I would ask the commissioners to introduce themselves. Sarah?
Sarah Brumos.
Gary?
Gary Kleiman.
And Nick.
Nick Pappas.
Thank you, guys. So the first agenda item is approval of the March 16th, 2022 meeting minutes.
I need to abstain from that because I wasn't there.
Okay.
Oh, I'm
Nick?
sorry, we have Nick.
We have Nick.
That's right.
I didn't have any comments on the meeting minutes. Gary?
I also was not there for the March
Ah.
16th.
So we'll have to, okay, so we'll have to carry these over to the next meeting, Gary.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. That's right. That's your route. We're holding this new line item commissioner comments. If there are any just matters you wanted to bring up that aren't on the agenda.
Right, more for a future agenda, but I had sent an email to Delia. I thought it would be helpful in thinking about our tree preservation policy.
Yep.
Well, it's not on the agenda for tonight. I thought it would be helpful to have a little bit of data. So I sent Delia an email request. If she could, when we do have it next on the agenda, if we could have some data for, an example lot to understand what the implications would be for a fully wooded lot.
That makes sense. Much like what Mark White was presenting last time, if you will, that conundrum of.
I think that could be a good test case.
Yeah.
Just, look through some options with a real lot, residency lot in mind, and then see how that would work for residence B and AA, et cetera.
Okay, well, thanks for that. That's a good, I think, thing to kind of parse out a little bit more, obviously, based on the comments that we received last time. All right, we'll move on to director's update.
Thanks, Eric. Just a couple of things very quickly. So you are all familiar with the Public Land Preservation Act, which is the act that's been in the state legislature for many, many years. It's an act to codify the Article 97 no net loss policy for conversion of Article 97 lands, which are conservation land, recreation land, and land that is held for watershed purposes. So it had passed the House, and then it did pass the Senate, but it includes some provisions that are challenging. Probably the biggest one, which is that there's a provision in there that if somebody wants to develop an Article 97 lands, they can offer cash instead of offering up replacement land. So that's going back to the House for further work. So stay tuned. Town meeting, I think everybody is aware.
Where would the cash go? If they offered up cash, would it be available for?
I would expect it would be dedicated to an open space account, but I don't know the details on that. I can follow up and let you know. Yeah.
I mean, I guess it won't matter unless.
Yeah, but it's a good question. I mean, I think it's really problematic to then
Yeah,
just put
slippery
everything
slope.
be a marketable. Every
What-
piece
what-
of land becomes, who's going to sort of offer the most compelling argument for.
Appraisals and how all that is done.
But I'll find out. Town meeting is May 1st, Sunday, starts at 1 p.m. It will go until 5 on Sunday. It's likely that it will extend into Monday evening. And we are again sponsoring a garlic mustard poll in mid-May, doing that jointly with the Concord Land Conservation Trust. And Peter Alden is updating a map that he had prepared, not last year, I think it was the year before, that identified areas of heavy garlic mustard infestations on town lands and land trust properties, so that we then could put that up here like we do with the Concord cleanup maps, and have people just sort of pick routes, and then we provide them with bags. They go and pull, when we did it last year, I think there was 129 bags of garlic mustard.
That's great.
So we're hoping to at least match that and maybe more. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Delia. All right, we have a few continuances. I think we have one with open and continue, and then two to be continued without discussion. Sarah, you want to take those two?
Yep. So I make a motion to open and continue to May the 4th without discussion. 1266 Monument Street, DP file 1371597, and 61 Black
Oh,
Duck
I
Road.
think that one would just be open and continue. And the other two would just
Oh,
be
sorry,
continued.
should
No problem.
I do them separately?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll give it a second.
Okay, so
Have a second on that one?
Sure. Sorry.
All right, and we'll take the vote. Sarah,
I,
Gary,
Aye.
Nick,
aye,
and I'm an I as well. And the other two.
and then the other two. So I make a motion to continue to May the 4th without discussion, 61 Black Duck Road, DP file 1371578, and 228 Park Lane, DP file 1371595.
Second.
Thank you. The vote. Sarah,
I,
Gary,
Aye.
Nick,
aye,
I'm an I as well. All right, so we'll move on to other business. So the first one we have up is the Blandings Turtle Report. Good evening.
Good evening. Sounds like you have a lot of pesto to make. Well have. My name is Brian Windmiller, for the record, 65 Arrowhead Road, Concord. And I'm here this evening. It's kind of an annual visit to officially present the annual report, an update of the work that we've been doing since 2003 with town support to conserve landing turtles at Great Meadows, and also to ask the commission to help support the project. It's commission has for many years, I think going back to about 2007 or so. So I'll start out. I know we had circulated the report, so all of you
Yeah,
received it, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I'll summarize some of the main points, some highlights. Some of the things, and much of the work that we do is mostly the same from year to year. We continue to monitor the population, to protect nests, and to head start young, and to work with Fish and Wildlife Service on managing the habitat for the turtles within the refuge boundaries. This year in particular was the second year that we had the opportunity to try and target trap for younger turtles. A lot of our head starting alumni, the turtles that were raised in captivity, mostly in schools, and then released over the years. The first cohort of head started young were released back in 2008. And we were able to catch 26 individual juvenile landing turtles that had formerly been head started. And so record a lot of data on them. And one other new thing that's pretty exciting is we've always been looking the turtles, most of the landing turtles in the population at any given time are to be found in the impoundments. The turtles are generally in the wetlands. They'll come out to go between wetlands and of course to nest. So the wetlands that they use are mostly within the impoundments. They use many other wetlands extending just over the Bedford line. There are a bunch of vernal pools kind of at the edge of the refuge property. They use more swamp fairly extensively, and they also use, some of the adults also use wetlands on the west side of the Concord River in the October Farm riverfront area. And thanks, Delia. And those are trapping locations that be used this past year around impoundments and then some in Moore's Swamp, kind of on the bottom left there. But if right across the river, it's just off this particular picture. There are some large wetlands in the Mass Audubon Brewster's Wood property as well as in town property. And yeah, there you go. Thank you. And so for the first time, with permission from Mass Audubon and Mass Wildlife, we have long observed that some of the habitat there looks really suitable, not only for the adults, which we know occasionally use it, they go back and forth across the river, but in particular for young turtles, it's harder to find really good habitat. They like thick scrub shrub. You can see kind of where all those circles are in the top right. That's where we release them into dense button bush in that pond. And the turtles, of course, they make up their own mind, so they scattered around. Good news is we recently recaptured all 8 of them, so they're all fine, made it through the first winter on their own. As you can see, they scattered around. One of them did move, I think it was about 450 meters to the southwest, the one in blue. So they're doing well, so that looks to be promising place to release a few more of the young turtles in the future. And then finally, we have collected enough data on the survival probabilities of formerly head-started turtles as well as the adults over time. So we could look back at all of the turtles that we've captured, and we could see how long it's been since we've last seen them. And knowing the average survival probabilities year by year, we can then go on and simply for each individual compute the probability that it's still alive and add those probabilities up. It's a good sort of known fates way of estimating the population of known animals. And what we are able to conclude is that the project, as we've known, but now we have some better numbers to attach to it, has been tremendously successful. When in 1973, this population had been trapped extensively and assessed by a couple of Worcester State University researchers. And at that point, they had pretty good capture data from the impoundments, and they estimated that the total population, it's interesting in Blatting's turtles, you have to be careful about the specific comparison points because juveniles are very hard to catch. They hide, don't move around too much, so they don't come readily to traps. That's why we have to work so hard to catch these younger turtles. The adults are much more readily captured, so you always get a somewhat skewed picture of the number of adults relative to juveniles. Anyway, in 1973, the estimate broke down to, they figured that turtles that were bigger than a certain size, bigger than 110 millimeters long, were pretty reasonably captured. And they estimated there were about 135 turtles of that size range then. And about 115 of those were adults. So that was in 1973. By the time we started working in 2004, the number of adults had fallen by more than half. So from 115 to around 55 adults. There were very few older juveniles, probably no more than 10 or 12 or so, in that sort of 110 millimeter to adult class. So maybe generously speaking, 135 had fallen to 65 or 70 individuals by 2004. Now the number of adults has grown slightly. So we estimate, our median estimate is right about 60 adults. But the number of head-started juveniles, so we've released to date, I think 581 head-started juveniles. And our median estimate for the number of those guys that are still alive is, I think, 337. So we estimate that the whole population of Atlantic turtles at Great Meadows is in the high 300s. And 180 individuals are already in that greater than 110 millimeter size class. So in other words, the population is already substantially larger than it was not only in 2004, it's, whichever metric you use, the population has, tripled or so, but even relative to 1973, the population of the larger group of turtles has increased from 135 to 182. 32 by our best estimate. So the recovery has been super successful. We also are raising our largest cohort of head started turtles right now. We took 83 hatchlings into the head starting program, and together with turtles from other populations, we're raising them in 32 different schools right now, as well as the New England Aquarium and the zoo. So I think that's kind of mostly concludes my summary. I'm happy to answer any
I
questions.
have two questions. One is the October farm population. First, did your statistics include those? Are they considered part of the same population?
They
Or
are.
They're just kind of going across the road?
Yes.
And so you're talking about the specific geographies that they like and they prefer, and that October Farm has some of that. Are there other areas in Concord that have that? And do you think about, oh, could we start a new population, or is that received?
It's a good question. We actually tried releasing Blanding's turtles into Estabrook Woods, I think back in about 2015, I believe we started. And we released small numbers, again, with Mass Wildlife's permission, with Harvard's permission, et cetera, and tracked them. They did much better than similar aged wild turtles would likely have done, but much more poorly than the head starts at Great Meadows. In particular, we had a really exceptional drought in 2016. In many of the wetlands in Estabrook Woods are relatively shallow. Many of them dried up, and the turtles started scattering, and many of them were caught and killed by predators. So all in all, we decided, things are working well at Great Meadows, not as well at Estabrook. I think it would be possible, for example, if you're familiar with Mink Pond in Estabrook Woods, kind of a central pond in the Harvard property. It's an artificially created pond at the dam. If we had permission, I spoke about it with Harvard, with folks at Harvard, and they were sort of fine with the idea. If we were to plant it with thicker shrub cover, right now it's not really suitable, but could be made so. So it's a possibility. But in general, it's a very good question. Right? In general, the state is fairly reluctant to permit moving rare animals from one place to another for a variety of reasons. One of the reasons is frankly regulatory, because they worry about the regulatory implications of moving rare species around. In this case, it was no problem getting permission to put young guys in across the river because the adults are using the same wetlands, right? So there's no new rare species implication.
And you said you trapped all those back again
We radio tracked them and caught them.
and caught them.
Yeah, so we have radios on them.
I
So
didn't track. I wanted to leave them.
yeah,
Okay.
so we can't, if we, again, because they're young, it's almost impossible at that age to catch them in traps.
Yeah. And what do you put, are they back now at the impoundment?
No,
They're still there?
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So when they were just caught, I think it was just last week. They were, I think, more or less, they hadn't moved since the winter, so more or less in the positions like this, those arrows.
And you mentioned there's about 60 adults now, give or take.
Mhm.
How long until some of those turtles, as part of the program, become adults? Is
So that,
when they
yeah,
start
quite
tripping
fair.
over?
Yeah, fairly soon. Not, tripping over is, so to put it in perspective, it's many more Blanding's turtles than were, 20 years ago. Yet in comparison, right? So let's say on the high side, maybe there were 400 Blanding's turtles now at Great Meadows. We estimated in 2004, when we did some work for capture, that just in the impoundments alone, there were over 3,000 painted turtles. Right? And
Wow.
and people aren't constantly tripping over painted
No,
turtles. So
no.
there's a lot of room to hide 400 turtles.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess that's more of what I had been thinking are there areas where reintroduction might make sense? But I guess we don't know where they have been lost.
We've been pushing to do that at a few sites. None in Concord. There are a couple of sites that we've talked about with the state. And like I mentioned, there's sort of a high activation energy threshold, kind of get the state biologists over to accept that.
Yeah. makes sense.
Just thinking about it. My last question is, as the new guy, you said that the NRC has been supporting this since 2007.
I think that's
How
about
do
right.
we support?
So each year, I think since about then, the NRC has been donating to, this effort has gone. So since 2017, we've run it through the Zoo New England's now Field Conservation Department. So the NRC, in this case, makes a check for the past years. It's been for $3,000 to, in this case, it would be to Zoo New England. And I'm completely unaware of the particulars of your financial position relative to what's possible. Would just note that we've been asking for the same amount, I think, kind of constantly. And so since in the past, I think about 6 years, in general, we've used that money to pay for some of a field technician's time, particularly during nesting season. And the rate that we pay field technicians is increased by exactly a third, in the past 5 or 6 years. So kind of following that up, if I might be so bold, just to ask for $4,000 for the coming year, which would kind of cover the increase in hourly wages for the field technician.
So, and dealing from a financial perspective on the NRC, that's good.
So I was just actually going to pull up it's very difficult for us to get the actual full budget, but it would come from wetland permitting fees. And there's, well upwards of $50,000 in that account. We spend very little of it because there's very little that it can be spent on, but research is one of the wetlands research. Is one of the areas that it can be put towards.
Sounds like a reasonable request.
We've also asked, there's been a secondary request that we've had for a few years. So we also work with a wood turtle population that lives on Massport land around Ellenbrook. And we've used it for paying for new radio transmitters. And I don't think we billed you for the radio transmitter for this. I have to ask Emily.
That's Karen.
But unfortunately, again, since that was really dating back to 2016, since that drought left the wood turtles basically exposed to the stream dried up. It left them exposed to predation by otters. So there are almost no turtles left. So in past years, we've mostly been using one radio. So the radios, new radios are about $200 a piece. So if I might ask, I think in the past we've asked for something like $350 worth of radio transmitters. I can ask you about that, but we haven't actually spent that amount in some time. So
the total request be $4,350?
$4,350.
Okay. Well, it sounds like the budget can accept that. All right, so with that, I think we'd be looking for a motion for the $4,350.
Yeah, so I move to approve the amendment request. Is that?
The one before.
Oh, I'm sorry. I move to authorize the expenditure of $4,350,000 from the wetlands account to be used for Blandings turtle and wood turtle research and protection.
Second,
Oh, second, yeah, sorry.
thank you. We'll take the vote. Sarah,
I
Gary,
Aye.
Nick,
Aye.
and I'm I as well. Appreciate the work.
You're very welcome. It's great to see you all.
All right, so we have I think it's an amendment, proposed amendment to the non-such law.
Okay. One of this out to each of you.
It's two-sided, it'll give you the
Great.
map and it'll give you the two
Thank you.
amendments. So good evening, my name is Anna Winter Rasmussen, 393 Estabrook Road. My husband Neil and I are the owners of a preserved 163-acre woodland property within the Estabrook Woods, which was placed under a conservation restriction in 1977 by its then owner, Raymond Emerson. Thanks to the advanced foresight and environmental preservation ethics of Mr. Emerson, it became one of the first properties in Massachusetts to be placed under conservation protection in perpetuity. In turn, its protection set the stage and the precedent for the preservation of one of the most significant critical core habitat resources in the Boston region, known as the Estabrook Woods. Mr. Emerson's conservation restriction is referred to in the NRC records as CR 22. In 1986, the Emerson family made an amendment to the 1977 conservation restriction on their property, allowing for limited public access on a 23.8 acre woodland parcel within their preserved acreage called the Nonesuch Lot. This is the only parcel protected under CR 22 that is subject to any rights of public access, and that access was conditional on specific terms of the amendment. 45 years after the amendment was written, it is, as many older restrictions come to be, in need of clarification and refinement. Original provisions within the 1986 amendment allow such changes to be made by the landowners, subject to the concurrence of the Natural Resources Commission. Unfortunately, over the past 6 years, we have had to keep Delia apprised of various repeated violations occurring on the Nonesuch Lot. These violations have been in contravention of the terms of the 1986 amendment and have been documented by the landowners, the Concord Police, visitors to the property, and by members of the Conservation Stewardship Committee. These infractions have included members of the public disposing of trash, nighttime smoking, and the discarding of ignited cigarettes in leaves, the consuming of alcohol with bottles and cans left on the premises, individuals cutting trees and new trails, vandalism of stone walls and gates, off-leash dogs chasing wildlife, mountain bike riding through wetlands and vegetation, and litter thrown into and in close proximity of the certified vernal pools. In addition, members of the public traverse the wooded and wetland areas of the lot to the west in order to enter protected wildlife habitat parcels where public access is prohibited. By refining and clarifying the 1986 amendment, we will be updating the provisions to better reflect and align with the present day NRC rules and regulations, which govern town conservation land. This will facilitate the further establishment of shared proper standards of stewardship throughout the private and public parcels included within the Estabrook Woods area. Given that the Estabrook Woods has been designated as a critical core habitat by the state of Massachusetts, it is clearly deserving of the highest level of protection we as land stewards can provide and secure. Our changes to the amendment would clarify that public access is limited to the use of the established and designated trails and does not allow for traversing interior woodland, wetland, or vernal pool areas. In addition, the town conservation land, the private conservation of land of this lot will be posted with proper rules and regulations governing smart, environmentally sound, and safe access within the property. On March 16th, I had the pleasure of walking the lot with Delia and discussed with her our vision for improving the protection of the area, while still allowing for the access the public has come to enjoy, and that which is most responsible and appropriate given our shared and paramount goal to preserve and protect the natural resources and the indigenous wildlife. The revisions to the amendment include the following. So if we have the slide, Delia, of the juxtaposition of the old and new, have you got that? Yeah, there we go. All right, provision A would include a clarification regarding the use of motorized vehicles, stipulating a specific allowance for the use of emergency and maintenance vehicles, which was not addressed in the previous amendment. Provision B specifies that the access will be on the designated trails within the lot, which includes 2,138 feet of Estabrook Trail going north and 445 feet of the Hugh Cargill Trail to the west. It also refers to the paths as trails and not roads to avoid confusion with what are known as the present-day Estabrook and Hugh Cargill roads. Finally, we will be adding the reference to the 1925 book and plan that specifically depicts the Nonesuch lot. This lot was formerly tax parcel 1523, but was merged into a group of 11 parcels in the mid-1990s to form a single current parcel 1442-1. Provision C will remain without change. And provision D, this addition will provide for the posting of rules and regulations that will be consistent with our neighbors, the Harvard Field Station, and consistent with responsible rules for passive recreational use within a protected Massachusetts critical core habitat. So we appreciate your partnership in preserving these irreplaceable woodland resources and respectfully request your concurrence with these proposed amendment updates. So thank you for your kind consideration and attention.
Thank you for your presentation. From what I can see, it seemed to make perfect sense in terms of obviously section A could qualify the access for emergency vehicles and whatnot, and then of course clarifying in B, obviously calling out the lot, and then I guess the only other one is D, which is the signage, if you will, and rules and regs. Anything towards that, I'm sure Deal had noted that if you proposed an amendment to that, in terms of the signage, just making sure that as you come up with that signage, perhaps amending that so that there's prior review and approval by the NRC.
Yeah, my understanding about signage is that that's a reserved right of the owners. And I was specifically looking over that because we discussed it with your conservation restriction that's held by the trustees of reservations. And in that, there's the town itself has the expressed right to determine the posting on your land. So it's not necessarily something that it's actually a reserved right, and by putting it in the amendment, it's an expressed right, as far as we understand. Of course, certainly, we all try to harmonize the rules within the woods between the public and private parcels, but we figure that our conservation restriction should be treated as yours is with the trustees of reservations.
And so they are all different, the conservation restrictions. Some do just sort of expressly allow, the grantor just does the signage and there's no sort of review. Others, there is that review and approval. So I think, working harmoniously with you as the CR holder, I think it, I think that's probably something that, it's something that I would recommend, that we just sort of be working together so that we're all on the same page. Is there?
Well, we always work together with you. I mean, that's,
Yes, I would agree with that.
yes.
But I think that, just to have that, since they are perpetual documents, that something, for a future landowner, because we do have that, and I'm not sure why we don't have it in one of the trustees, to be honest.
I believe because legally it's a reserved right. So it's a reserved right of the owners, given that the owner of the land basically is only subjected to the holder of the CR making sure that the regulations are enforced.
Right.
That's the legality of it.
Right.
So signage is a reserved right. That being said, I think we're all working towards, as we have done in the past, harmonizing the rules. And as the population increases, as visitorship increases, sadly enough, the need for posting signage is increasing. I mean, it's all something we really can't stand to do. it seems antithetical to, keeping this a beautiful preserved natural habitat. However, people need to know what their parameters are. So I think, we've worked together with Harvard, with the town, with private landowners to try to standardize signage. And we want to make sure that the signage is as aesthetically, shall we say, appropriate as it can possibly be. And maybe we'll only get better at that over time as we try to work together.
Yeah, I mean, we disagree that there's more need as population increases, more pressures on land, that there may be needs for signage. It's what's the mechanism by which we harmonize? So, I mean, it's been very unofficial, I guess, and has been working well. But my understanding is that the request for the amendment is to ensure that it continues to work well going forward. Is that generally where it comes from? It's not like trying to question, it's more just trying to,
Well, I
make
think
sure-
we established the Estabrook Council
Yeah.
to actually address this specifically because, Harvard University, who owns the lion's share
Yeah.
of the property within the woods, will not be signing anything where they are subject to any approval of the town or the commission. But by virtue of them being a partner in the Estabrook Council, we try to get on the same page and try and use that mechanism to try to harmonize, going forward, what is placed on the properties. And hopefully that'll only get better as time moves on. But we're going to have a lot of people, we have a lot of parties. We don't just, we have Middlesex, we have, private entities. And so, we're hoping that the council will serve that purpose to get everyone on the same page.
And is there any signage out there today on any of those Harvard parcels and, those disparate parcels, private and public?
Yes, I think I remember, Delia, when we did all this, we got together at the Estabrook Council starting roughly about 2005, when we felt that it was really necessary to place some signage on the properties. And then we resurrected it, I'm thinking maybe 2015, 2014, 2015. So we all met together and discussed, and it was primarily to deal with some of the issues with the increased population coming in. So, whether dogs need to be leashed, or, not cutting any vegetation, no fires, no motorized vehicles.
Right.
So this was the first time that we really sat down together and tried to work out, what we could do with proper signage. So the private entities, including Harvard, we put together signs that stipulated some of the rules and regulations, and we did post those and asked other private owners whether or not they would be willing to post those on their property too. And then Delia came up with signs for the town, which mirrored and reflected the things that we had discussed in the council. So they're
So it
pretty
sounds
much
like
aligned.
the Estabrook Council is sort of an ad hoc mechanism, more or less informal, that gets all of the parties aligned and harmonized. And otherwise, each entity has its own CR that dictates
It's protocol.
its protocol.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you could, in theory, have one property owner putting a sign that it feels is appropriate, and an adjacent property owner putting a different sign that it feels is appropriate. And it's this ad hoc mechanism that has worked well so far to work out the differences.
It has, and I
I'm just
mean,
trying to understand.
yeah,
how it
oh
works.
yeah, and the thing is that, we're not, when private parcels don't have, these particular CRs on them or what have you, people are going to be able to do what they wish to do.
Sure.
We can't control all that. However, I think that Delia has made great headway with making connections with various landowners, and I think that we're all trying desperately to work together to make sure that we come up with the proper signage. If places have to be posted, that is appropriate and will, communicate to the visitors how best to treat the properties.
So it sounds as if that at least the staff recommendation in terms of, NRC, I guess we'd say loose oversight, is not, it really isn't in your.
Well, I just don't think legally it's, I
We-
mean, we're putting in an expressed, and again, it is a reserved right, so I don't think legally it's something that's placed in this kind of situation. However, we're certainly very happy and amenable to always working with the NRC and trying to, build more enthusiasm and emphasis around the council so that we can really pull in some of those private landowners and keep Harvard, up to date with what's happening. They have a big property there, and they really rely on the private landowners and on the town to really keep them apprised of what's happening. And so I think that, the council is a really good resource. It's worked since 2005, and I think it can only get better. And Delia's been terrific. And I think that we're all on the same page. I don't see any problem with trying to work harder on.
And is
putting
the
in what's
council,
going
excuse me,
Go ahead.
and is the council currently kind of meeting on this? Or
Well, the
plan
last-
to meet on it soon?
Yeah, I mean, the last time we worked on the signage, and we have the green signs. I don't know if you've seen any of them. That stipulates some of the rules and regulations. And they're pretty much, I think, we're all on the same page with these so far.
Mhm.
There are some things coming up right now about the erosion on the trails that are caused by the increased use of mountain bikes. And that's something that, we all should get together as a council and talk about, how this is affecting the properties. What do we see as far as the erosion of tree roots and various vegetation. So, as we get together as a council, as people, as different entities decide that there's an issue, then we should call a meeting, get together and discuss it. Decide, are we going to change our signage? What are we going to do about this? Or, how are we going to address it? How can we better communicate to the people and try to listen to the visitors to see, if they're really understanding the posted rules and if they're working.
Yeah, understood. Okay. So how do the commissioners feel about that in terms of like the proposal on the table is for these three amendments, A, B, and D, but foregoing the further amendment to section D. Here from the proponent.
Remember, the NRC, if we're not enforcing the rules that align with the establishment of the amendment, obviously the NRC has, you have.
Sure, yeah, it's part of the
So
CR.
that's, if anyone who posts any signage, and that signage does not harmonize with the actual intent to protect the lot,
Right.
then obviously the NRC has a large and important role in making sure that it is enforced correctly.
Because that would help me is to understand exactly what is our role within a conservation restriction. If we, I'm not saying we would, but like if we did disagree of, whether a sign is actually going towards core protection of passive recreational and designated protected core habitats.
Well, I think if you have it in there as, that the NRC approves it, or the NRC or designee approves it, then you have that ability to sort of work that out prior to the sign being erected. But once the sign goes up, if you disagree, and there's nothing in the CR that says that you have an ability to say, to offer an opinion on it,
Right.
Especially if it's a
We don't
reserved
have-
right at the owner. I'm
Well,
not sure.
I'm not seeing, so CRs, they're all different, and this is one of the older ones, as you mentioned, one of the first ones that was
Mhm.
placed.
Mhm.
And I'm just looking through this really quickly. I mean, the majority of the CRs is describing the different parcels that make up the, 100+ acres of this CR.
Right.
But in the reserved rights, I don't see signage as necessarily, I don't see that as a reserved right in this restriction.
Well, they don't need to put it in because indeed it is a reserved right. So it doesn't, you don't, sometimes it will be expressed that it will be an express reserve right, but generally speaking, because it is the landowner's right, it's not necessarily even mentioned.
And some of the older ones, I mean, the older CRs, there's a lot of, gray, and I think that's right. I think that there is, an understood assumption that there's a reserved right, that landowners have the right to post their property, but now when we draft CRs, it includes that as a reserved right, that there's the ability to erect signage, to express the interests of the grantor or the grantee, usually the grantors of, hunting or, wildlife preserve or whatever it might be. And some say that signage can only be a certain size. Some say that it has to be, worked out between the grantor and the grantee. Every CR is different.
But we
So-
do that. As sort of
Signage
standard
is-
practice when we develop a CR.
Signage is
often-
now included as a reserved right, with
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 conditions,
provisions.
yeah.
it's some require a review and some don't, I mean, and so I'm just trying to, and I can look back and see,
Well, if
which
you look at
ones, that-
your CR with Punkatassett,
right, with the
you-
trustees. and
yeah, the
Yeah.
trustees have no say in what you do with your signs.
Right.
So, I mean,
I think that's true for most of them. I would need to sort of double check what, I know there are some that say, that there's review by the grantee.
Yeah.
And I can take a look and we can, bring this back to another meeting if you want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, if there are examples within this block where they have that as a reserved right, and I have no problem granting it here.
Say that again?
If they have a reserved right to post signage without NRC review,
Well, that's what
This
in
one
this
doesn't
block.
have anything.
I know this one doesn't, but I mean, are there the trustees, they have that ability,
that-
where
that
Harvard has
CR
that ability?
There's no CR on the Harvard land, but on the town's punk land, that CR was drafted 20 years after this one was.
Right.
So it became a much lengthier document,
With those provisions,
With
some of them
a
built
lot
in.
more provisions that were built in because that was what the standard was at the time for it.
but again, the Punkatassett CR does not, the trustees have no oversight over your town size.
Right,
So,
yeah, as
I
drafted.
mean,
in the
our
CR.
CR should be in alignment with the, I feel with yours, with the trustees. Hopefully, there'll be very few signs that have to be posted, and probably posted at, only a few spots, as we have done at this point. So over time, we'll see how that goes. Hopefully, we'll come up with things that are pretty innocuous, but
Yeah.
do the trick.
Which, signage does, and that's, a testament to the signage that you have been creating and putting up. My concern is that these are perpetual documents and, what does the signage look like 100 years from now?
And I'm trying to follow the legal pieces of all
Right.
this, but I guess what I'm thinking is, would there be any harm in stating that we, would review and agree on the language?
So that was what the suggested amendment was?
Yeah.
Right, and
Right, was just to have the NRC just sign off on it.
Yeah, again, I think legally, it's just, this would be the only CR that I know of on private land that would be subject to that. Now, I'm the last person that would have any problem with the NRC giving me advice. And I'm hoping that that owners that come after us feel the same way. Again, there aren't going to be an enormous amount of signs, and again, the NRC's role is to enforce the amendment and the restriction. And if that's the case, if there was something that was antithetical to that, that would be the point when the NRC communicates with the landowner and says,
Right.
wait a minute here, the signage is,
Doesn't
you
line
know,
up
is
with
in
the CR.
contradiction of the CR. What are we
Right.
going to do about it?
Right.
I mean, you know, again, it's to protect the beautiful scenic integrity of the property. And if some owner put up some atrocious sign, then I would think the NRC would say, hey, wait a minute here. We're not really protecting this, are we? Because your role is to enforce it.
Well, yeah, and I should note that the amendment that's proposed also notes at the end, subject to review and approval of the CR amendment by town council. So there's a second, step of that as well.
Right, so I just, because this is a legal document, I think town council should review it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. As an amendment, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So do you think it's fair that we carry this over? And at least have town council look at the proposed A, B, and D amendments of minimum? Okay. Still leaves the question hanging in regards to time, so. I believe.
And I can look and see what other CRs
Okay,
might have that. or might
Okay.
have to have that language.
And we'll get a more legal opinion if that's
Yeah.
necessary for you guys.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't think at this point, don't
No,
worry
yeah.
about it yet. If we need that, I'll just let you know if we need that.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
So with that, I think we're back on track with, I think we're jumping right to the first
Yeah.
meeting. Let's get to it. It's the Minuteman National Historic Park. Multiple addresses, DEP file number 137-1598.
So who's,
Who will be addressing us this evening in regard to this application?
Butler here,
sorry.
trying to get the video. There we go. No. Good evening.
Good evening.
You're hearing 1598.
We are hearing 15, no, we are hearing,
Yes.
is that?
Minuteman,
Okay,
yes.
Yes, yeah, I'm sorry, DP file number 1598, correct.
I apologize. I've been trying to monitor. We're also up in Lincoln tonight, and so I've been trying to gauge who's coming up first, so I can shut down my laptop for the moment.
Sure.
And I
Can have your
believe-
Name and address for the record?
This is Brian Butler from Oxbow Associates, Boxborough, Massachusetts. And I believe also on the meeting is Margie Coffin Brown from National Park Service, as well as Kaya Walker. Yep, she's here. That can also respond to any questions from the commission with regard to technical merits or administrative business on the boardwalk. I can give you a short overview if you like, and give you some
Sure.
visuals.
Why don't you give us a brief overview and then we'll take questions and we'll go from there.
Is it possible to see the speakers and not ask twice? No.
I asked the same question.
Actually, I can, let me try. Let me first get the,
I can share my screen if that's easier, or if you're prepared.
yes, hold on
It
one
just
second.
seems like
Go ahead,
they should
Brian.
be in the box.
Yeah.
and, I know.
Do the view grid.
Yeah, I have it, I have it pinned, that's why.
Oh,
There we go.
That's better.
We got you,
We can
Brian.
see you now.
Hi, Brian.
You're on the big screen.
So we're looking, are we looking at my screen or your screen now?
I'm looking at you.
Okay,
So if you,
really-
go ahead and share your screen.
okay, let me see. I'm gonna put up two. Too many PDFs here. Actually, no, that's Lincoln. I'm sorry.
Do you want me to pull up the project plans? Or you, okay.
Here we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to make it a lot bigger once you get to where you want to be.
Yeah, and what I think I'll do is just go through a quick we share a different screen here instead and just give you a real quick visual walkthrough, if that's okay. Can I stop share and reshare
Yep.
the screen? Are you looking at the Minuteman National Park
Yes.
Boardwalk?
Got it.
Yeah.
Great.
It's for Lincoln, though.
It's what?
It's for Lincoln.
Yeah, but
We got the Lincoln NOI.
There we go. We just scroll up here.
There
we
you
go.
go. There you go.
It's kind of a juggling act. So just for the background of the commissioners, I know Delia has a familiarity with this project from pre-meetings with Margie and Kaya. There's a series of boardwalks that most of which occupy the former Battle Road alignment, and through the wetlands, of course, there's boardwalks throughout the park. There's 9 of them that are the subject of a current rehabilitation project. 5 of them are in Lincoln, and 4 of them are in Concord. And those are, of course, the ones we're discussing today. And just for I know that every commissioner is not necessarily familiar with the park and all the boardwalks, so I was going to just run through the 4 subject sites today that we're discussing. I believe they're west to east. This is Merriam Boardwalk, which is near Merriam's Corner off of Lexington Road. It's a 40-foot or thereabouts boardwalk. It crosses Mill Brook. And these are visions, transverse views. This is toward Lexington Road. There's a box culvert here from the bridge. And this is looking to the north up Mill Brook, which is a perennial stream. This site is just going to be replaced. The decking is going to be replaced. So there's no structural work, no augering or no footings replaced. It would just be a replacement with a short guardrail on it over the actual bridge span or the stream span, just as a safety precaution. This is a pretty simple matter. It's in floodplain, but the work is essentially in kind. So there'll be no displacement or loss of flood storage. It's also in riverfront area and within the inner riparian zone, within the 100-foot riparian zone on either side of Mill Brook. Again, it's an in-kind replacement, so although there is proposed work in riverfront area for this application, it's essentially impact neutral because the planking will be removed and the planking will be replaced in kind. The railings, I believe, are above floodplain, or if not, the square foot displacement of those is almost immeasurable. We can return to the specifics on these, but I thought just visually, the members might want to see what they're regulating if you haven't been to the site yet. Just to the east of that is the Perry Field Boardwalk. And that originates near the parking area across from Palumbo Farm on Lexington Road. It bisects a intermittent former agricultural ditch. It goes from the parking lot through a small patch of woods over that ditch and then out to Perry's Field. And the view here is from Perry's Field looking to the west. And I don't think I have to do much marketing here to convince you that the condition of this boardwalk is not pristine. You can see the rack in it just from this angle that wasn't really deliberate. Other view, this is a transverse view from near Lexington Road of the boardwalk as well. And you can see the ditch. It was an old ag ditch. There's no inlet to it from Lexington Road. It's a blind ditch that ends at Lexington Road, then is confluent with the larger marshes to the north the parking lot and of the old Willow Pond kitchen site. It's just to the west of this for perspective. So we think this is a pretty simple and necessary improvement as well. That's about 75 feet. It'll be fully replaced. So that these stanchions or pylons will be replaced with the diamond type mounts that I have. There's a little video I think I sent to both commissions earlier to shows the installation. There's really no generation of excess spoils from this because it's a hammered in system. It's a bollard with 4 rods that are hammered in at 45-degree angles, and they're much more stable in an unstable soil than pylons that are 4, 5, 6 feet long will still over time rack and frost heave, and these diamond rigs are pretty much immune to that. So I understand. Can't testify personally. Moving along as we proceed from Merriam's Corner through Olive Stowe, which we just visited. I'm sorry, to Perry's Field, which we just visited. Now we're at the Oak Boardwalk, which is very short. I think it's about 25 feet over a small agricultural ditch right about where Dom is standing here. You can see this is also racked. It's almost at grade. Much of it is on the soil surface. There's not really any flow underneath the decking here that I could detect, at least in recent history. There is a 3-inch aluminum irrigation pipe that parallels this. And just forensically, I'm assuming that irrigation pipe takes the place of whatever function this ditch historically had to the fields, lower fields to the right or to the west of where Dom is standing here. So this, I think, is another simple and de minimis activity. It will be replaced in kind with decking only. No structural elements are included in the replacement of this. And then the final, this is a different view from the opposite end of that boardwalk. You see a little ramp up here, about 25 feet of decking with side rails, and then a small ramp at the other end. And again, the wetland is marginally, I think one could argue that it's not a jurisdictional resource area, but we didn't think we wanted to try to make that argument and spend the resources and time to do so. So we're just conceding that it's a resource area, and we are doing a fairly benign activity. And finally is the Olive Stowe. This is the largest of the Concord structures. It meanders through a variable wetland of scrub and shrub, some forested wetland, some emergent. It will be replaced in full, meaning that the stanchions or the supports will be replaced. I believe the number is the same. We do have a table in the notice of intent that shows where we deviate from the current formula in terms of number of supports or lengths of boardwalks, but I believe this is a 1-to-1. I'm going to another show visage of it. This is a observation bench area, resting observation area about midway through the alignment of the boardwalk, and it affords nice views of the emergent and scrub community there. And this is where it gets into over to the right into forested habitat on the easterly side for a short time into a palastrine wooded area. And this is where it exits on the easterly side here. So that's just a flavor, I hope, for what we're talking about, the scale, the setting, the context, and so forth. We can review. I can change unshare perhaps. Our new share, yeah.
And the proposal is complete replacement of all of that, or is it spot repairs or?
That one is replaced, yeah, in total. Let me increase the size here so you can see. I apologize for the number of pages we submitted to you all, but that constituted a complete filing, even though there's probably 100 pages in the application. This is filed as a limited project under the trails allowances of 1053 3J, I believe it is. And we think we comply in totality with those conditional requirements that this will not be an impediment to water flow or the passage of wildlife, particularly where it's a pre-existing boardwalk. You really can't argue that we're impeding any of the statutory interests, I don't believe, by replacing these, and the public benefit, I think, is self-evident for the million or so visitors that enjoy the park every year. These, I think, are features that are of critical importance to allow people to easily get at various points on the Battle Road Trail and enjoy the wetland vistas and views that you really can't get if you're not immersed in it, at least in the case of the Elm Brook and which is in Lincoln and Olive Stowe in Concord here. So we think that the merits are self-evident, and we don't probably have to bang that drum too loudly. In terms of performance standards, the only riverfront area we have in this filing is for the Merriam, the first site that we reviewed. There's in that parcel of land, there's about 300,000 square feet of riverfront area, and we're altering in kind, if you will, 2,700 square feet of it. So it's a de minimis or impact neutral alteration of riverfront area. The remainder of these are all in buffer zone or in BVW. In the case in point is the Olive Stowe boardwalk that is almost entirely in BVW. That's about 450 feet in length and 2,400 or thereabouts square feet in BVW. And it will be replaced in kind. And I believe the count of the stanchions is a 1-to-1. I'll scroll to our table here. There we go. Yeah, for Olive Stowe boardwalk is. I hope this is large enough for members to see.
Yeah.
No,
It's fine.
can you zoom in? Sorry.
Zoom in. Yep.
I can't see it.
Oh,
Better?
Thank you.
So this is our impact table 1 in the narrative. Olive Stowe boardwalk, you can see 107 stanchions or foundation posts currently, and we'll have 104, 107 when we're finished. Merriam's Corners 4 with no changes, 12 and 12 in Perry Field that will be swapped out, the 12 old, the 12 new. Oak doesn't have any vertical supports, and so the whole number of supports or foundation posts is 123 existing, 123 proposed. So we think this is a benign activity. We think it's the ends well justify the means. There will be some trampling and matting, temporary matting of vegetated wetland, particularly in the Olive Stowe section. But we don't see that it's going to be very acute in a matter of days, and we don't see that being a persistent impact. If there is any scarification that doesn't heal immediately, we've put in our narrative that we're prepared to reseed that with a native wildflower mix, a wetland wildflower mix or wetland mix. My preference would be to just collect seeds on site because there's acres, countless acres of emergent vegetation, goldenrods, sedges, rushes, turtle heads, Joe Pyeweed, the whole litany. So I don't think the commission would object to that, but the default, if a contractor is going to be responsible for it, they're not going to do that. And they would use a native seed mix from New England wetland plants.
Brian, on the mats, what kind of mats are you proposing?
Simple, either 5/8 inch plywood is one option for the contractors, or the synthetic mats that are they're not timber mats, so swamp mats in the conventional sense. If you're used to power line projects and so forth, like we are, they're 12 foot by 9 inches by 4 feet wide, and they weigh probably about a ton each. This would all be hand movable. They'd be brought in by a skid steer to the site along the trails and then moved out by hand, presumably, where as needed, and moved along for each installation of each of the paired posts on either side of the boardwalk. So they'll take, with a replacing post and decking, they'll take the decking off, remove the old stanchions or the old foundations, and right in place, in this instance, I think they're all virtually in the same locality. They'll put the diamond rig and anchor that with the 4 long angled posts that secure it in the ground. So there's no augering in the ground with this system, and spoils that are just broadcast out of it. It'll be pull the old posts, and insert these new, somewhat more technologically advanced and complex diamond rigs.
Brian, how do they take out the old posts? Are those just cut at grade or are they removed entirely? How do
Cutting
they-
at grade would probably, I'm not sure if that's specified in the contract, but it would probably be more benign activity and quicker and less expensive. Margie, I don't know if you're available to comment on that.
I probably would.
Yeah, there are wood.
Don't they have a footing?
I wouldn't think so. How would you put them in? In the wetlands, you know, initially.
Margie, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Could you repeat the question?
Just is the plan to extract all the old timber, or is it to cut flush? We don't, or is that a contractor decision?
Most of them have pushed out of the ground. And so our thought is that they'll be relatively easy to remove. But if they're not easy to remove, then they probably will just be cut. We don't want to bring any equipment into the wetland to extract them. But we also are a little concerned about cutting them because they are plastic. And so any cutting would have to be, very carefully mitigated so that we don't get plastic shavings into the wetland. So I guess our general hope is to remove them.
So if they're plastic, what's their physical makeup today if they're plastic? I mean, how would the plastic support the boardwalk itself? I mean, I don't know.
Are you talking about I'm sorry, are you talking about the existing footers or?
Yes, the
new
existing footers. Yeah.
The existing footers are recycled plastic. They were driven in to the wetland with basically a post pounder until they hit refusal. And that's really the source of the problem. That's why we have to replace the boardwalks. They were not installed deep enough. And so frost has been getting under them and just pushing them up. And that's why you're seeing a lot of the tilting. At Olive Stowe, you can actually see the bottom of the footer in one location.
Hanging from the decking.
Yeah, if you look over the decking and jump on the boardwalk, the bottom of the footer wiggles.
Yeah.
So Margie, how will you, if you're not going to cut them, which I understand that makes sense with the plastic, how do they get removed? How do they get pulled out of the ground?
Could you rock them?
Well, I guess they're not in the ground. They really aren't. They've been lifted.
I know that some of them are not, but there's over 100. I mean, there's many that are at least partially in the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we just don't think they're very deep.
How do they get out?
Well, I guess I can't answer that fully because we don't know how deep each one is. So I would imagine what the contractor would do is rock them and try and extricate them that way. And then if they couldn't, then I think we just have to be very careful that the extraction method doesn't create more impact than cutting them is a possibility and just leaving them.
But cutting them creates a potential issue with, microplastics and particles in the wetlands and so on and so on. So that would be, I don't think that would be a preference from the NRC side to have that happen.
Yeah, and we agree with that.
Yeah.
It's not our preference.
Sure.
So I think maybe we have to have some conditions, like our preferred method would just be to lift them out and
Sure.
take them away. But if they are not easy to extract, I think you could possibly drill a hole in them and try and use something to kind of I can't, ratchet, I think it's called, or come along.
You can
So
put
you
a
can-
cleat on them, Margie, put a cleat, just nail a cleat into it and use a polar bear kind of lever to get them loose, I'm sure, because none of them are very deep or secure, but so that's probably a solution because we don't want to, if you have to
You
cut
wanna
a couple
drill
of them,
either.
that's not so bad. If you have to
Yeah.
cut dozens, that's a lot of plastic
Yeah.
generation.
well, shoot.
Nail is better than drill. We
Yeah.
agree with that. Okay. So yes, so some kind of mechanism to enhance the lifting strength without heavy equipment.
Right, and not creating any shavings or plastics into the wetlands, so. So Delia, I guess we'd want to propose a condition towards that.
Yep.
Okay. And I did watch, I think probably most people watched that Diamond Pier video, which was interesting. And I believe Delia staff had a lot of success with helical piers as well. So just wanted to understand what you feel the difference is, or the better, why this is a better system than perhaps helicals, if you will.
Helical, you need a machine, more than the hydraulic rig that the gentleman showed just there.
Right.
And
get
so that
through
means
all the-
bringing a Bobcat sized machine or larger into the wetland, the entire length of it, and on both sides of the boardwalk alignment. As you can see, this tech here is kind of a much more benign. You place the hub on the ground and then anchor those for anchoring posts in with a air hammer or whatever that device is.
So Brian,
think
are
this
those, I
is-
mean, we've actually put in bridges with just a generator, just a handheld generator with helical piers, just to drive them in. Are you proposing this diamond pier because it's more structurally sound than helical piers? Or, I mean, because the helical piers you don't need equipment to put those in.
I can respond to that. So we did several corings in the locations where the boardwalks were lifting the most. And the engineer determined that we hit refusal very quickly and that the helical pier system would be too difficult to screw into the refusal. Whereas the diamond pier system with these multiple, almost like nails going in different directions, would be able to penetrate the refusal. And so that was the number one reason that we switched to the diamond pier system.
Thank you. Let's see, I think there's a number. Time of year, in terms of doing this work, what are you anticipating in terms of your approach?
And will the whole area be closed down to the public at the time?
Brian, do you want me to answer that one?
Yeah, you know what the contract likelihood of the contract process when through. We want to do it, of course, dry season.
Correct.
But we don't have a specific window that I'm aware of. That it will depend on when the contract is actually executed, Margie, to some extent.
To some extent, but also we can add that to the contract. Obviously, the more we restrict the season, the higher the price is. So, but that's certainly something that we are very mindful of, is minimizing impact.
Which I think, Delia, correct me, I think you had noted it earlier, was June 1 through October 15th would be the preferred work timeframe. Which again captures the busy season, if you will, in terms of contracting these parts, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's a ample window.
Okay.
These boardwalks are going to be put into a contract with general trail repairs, maybe even the infra reroute. So the contractor will have plenty of work to do during the field work season.
And will you just close it to the public? I assume you'll have to.
Yes, and so that's a whole component of the contract is partial closures, rerouting, fencing, just trying to keep the public out of these areas while work is going on.
And in your many pages on your application, is there and I think Brian touched on it a little bit, but is there just a general description of the general construction sequencing, whether it's replacement in kind on a couple of these locations versus full replacement? Is there a general description of that? I think really for staff to make sure that is kind of going according to plan, if you will, and the contractor's not going, doing means and methods that may not be in keeping with, the specifications or your expectations of the, the construction sequencing.
So we have the description of the project that was part of our application. Is that?
And
Well, perhaps maybe as part of the order of conditions, as you bid it out, and maybe a contractor comes into focus and he has his means of methods, maybe he can promote his construction sequencing that could be shared and agreed to by the NRC, just to make sure that that's in staff, so that is in keeping with expectations, if you will.
Yeah, that's fine. And we do have it written into the contract that the contractor is responsible for adhering to all permits. And so creating those conditions, basically, they're agreeing to those.
Yeah, so I think we probably want to put something in there that, so I think staff has a better understanding of what the expectation is in the field once the contractor shows up.
Yeah. That's good.
And I think and again, that time of year, if that, the low flow time of year, that would also want to be put into the bid specifications as well. I think, again, Delia picked up on that earlier in terms of just making sure that as he's bidding that, he's aware of that, requirement.
Yeah. And we anticipated that there would be some revisions after this meeting.
Yeah.
Are there any trees that need to be removed as part of this? I mean, I'm noticing in one of the photos of Olive Stowe, there's a tree that is sort of hanging right over it. Are there other trees that or if there are trees that you anticipate having to be removed?
Or protected.
Yeah, or tree protection? Can you speak to that?
Well, I must compliment you on your observations. That is the one tree we are wondering about whether it will stay or go, as it is really next to the boardwalk. But we have no plans to specifically remove trees as part of the project. There have been a lot of trees that have failed near the Merriam Boardwalk because there's an abundance of ash trees in that area. And so even, one came down yesterday. It's probably on the trail today, but so these areas have had a lot of blowdowns, particularly because they're high in ash. And then we had that derecho event, but we don't have specific plans to remove trees.
But is there any that you need to protect that will have to be put on the plans, right?
Yeah, around the
how are
work
you gonna
area.
do that? Yeah.
Right, I mean, that one, for example, it's either coming down or it's got to be protected. So if it's going to come down, you need to have a tree plan that identifies which trees are coming out and what replacement. And if they're all going to stay, then what steps are you taking to protect the trees that are, as you're seeing there, right next to it?
you could condition it to wrap trees with, within, say, 4 feet of the alignment, like the example. Can you see the
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
photo? Yeah. It would make sense to wrap that tree. I don't think we need to wrap this one necessarily because it's not going to be
Right.
backhoes and dozers going through there. It's going to be guys with a.
Right, so just having a note on the plan that identifies what the tree
Yeah.
protection is would be helpful.
And it,
Yep.
it should be more robust than just wrapping. It should, I mean, we're looking at, at a minimum now, putting in like 4-foot high welded fence, a wood wire fence. It's in our submittal checklist, Brian, if you want to take a look at that. That's,
Yeah, the wood wire strapping kind of,
it's not strapping, it's more, I mean, in this picture, you're not going to be able to do the entire
Right.
circumference around the tree. And, really where you want to protect it is the section that's closest.
adjacent. Yeah.
So you might need to be creative and think about how, how for something like that, that's, 2 feet off the boardwalk. I don't think strapping is really gonna cut it, but that might be all you could do in that case.
Okay. Yeah, it's not, there's not a tremendous number of trees that are that close to the, I don't have a count, we didn't do an inventory, but it's most of this boardwalk is also through marsh as opposed to tree
Right,
canopy.
Right.
But there's probably a dozen or more trees that are at least in the zone that could get banged up.
right.
And I think one of the last, pieces of the protocol too is that, again, as you put that matting down or whatever you determine you want to work off of, transporting that from section to section, want to be mindful of that because of the invasives and some of the, we don't want to transport invasives that are in one section to another section that invasive is not present.
Mhm.
So I think that'd want to be part of the kind of the specification to the contractor on how that is directed and how the NRC reviews that.
I believe that's in the specs, Margie, for the machines have to be inspected and cleaned, not just seeds, but
Machines.
debris, dirt
Yeah.
debris before.
I'll check because we have a lot of
Machinery.
concurrent contracts, but so for the boardwalk, then yes, we'll make sure.
Yeah,
that-
for machinery and/or those mats or those kind of work areas, you're going to move from section to section as you go.
Yeah, and Brian, we're talking about the type of swamp mats that you're thinking about a little while ago. Do you have a spec that you can send to us to take a look at so we can sort of have a sense of what those, so they're not really going to be the timber mat, something a little more portable or flexible. But if you have a spec for that and you could just send that in, that would be helpful.
Yep, I can probably find it before we finish here, but, or at least a product equivalent.
No, we haven't. Good.
So I think the last point is identifying a stockpile location on the plan, which we would like to be outside of the 25-foot. So what's it called? No disturb zone.
I only heard a part of that.
I apologize. But
Brian trying to create a stockpile location and or equipment, and again, part is means and methods, all that should be outside of 25.
Yeah, in
Notice
cases
there's
like
no-
this, I mean, they at the visitor center is a
Yeah.
different town.
You can back it
It's
up.
not a problem at Merriam, it's not a problem at Perry, it's not a problem at Oak. There's plenty of open space at all those, and
Yeah.
similarly here at Olive, on the west approach, it's not a problem. On the east approach, I'd have to, my memory's not that good. But I think on the east
Leave that on
approach,
the
there's adequate
Yeah.
room to
Yeah.
back off
Yeah.
here 25 feet, Margie.
Yeah, using the trail as the piling area, we basically can push it up the trail as far as need be.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, if you could just indicate that on your plan revisions, that would be great.
Okay.
Any other comments from the commission?
No?
Okay.
Looks like a good project, so
Yeah.
just a few things to add to the plans.
All right, so we'll go out for any public comment in regard to this application. You'll have to let us know if you see anybody.
So Brian, if you can stop share.
Mhm. Okay. Yep.
Okay, I do not see any hands raised.
Okay. So Brian, are you good continuing to May 4th, or is that going to be pushing you for plan revisions? Because that they will have to be in on Friday, correct?
Friday, the 22nd or whatever it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Margie, can we possibly accomplish that?
By this Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit of a stretch.
Well, so I guess, is it possible that all of the requested could all be conditions? Do we have to revise the plans, or can we list everything as conditions?
You probably would have to have it on the plans. The things that have to be on the plan should be on the plans. Again,
And so that's the stockpile locations and what else?
Tree
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 protection.
protection.
Tree protection.
And identifying any trees on the plan as well.
Okay, well, we'll see, we'll check and see if we can get it by Friday.
Okay, we'll put you down the 4th. If you can't, it'll be the next meeting, which should be
The
18th of May.
And also the access routes and matching locations on the plan as well.
Well, the access, they'll probably use the pass, as I think they said, right?
Yeah.
You could just indicate that if you
Okay.
want to say that's the kind of construction pathway, will be kind of redundant with the existing pass. That would be fine.
Okay, and the matting, to clarify, so it's not the location of the matting, it's the type.
The type,
Mhm.
yeah.
And were there
Plans for
preferences?
cleaning it.
Yeah,
plans for cleaning it as it's moved for invasive species.
yeah, just like the machinery, so just the protocol.
Right.
Okay, and with the mats, would plywood be acceptable, or was there a requirement that it be something like a rubber mat?
There's not a requirement for it. It sounded like that was where you were headed. We just want to understand what it is going to be so that it's clear to us.
Yeah,
So we don't see these, big power line timber mats out there when we're not expecting them.
That's not what we're doing, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I think that's also a good point, just the protocol for how invasives will be managed as you move the, equipment, including those mats from site to site. So
okay, great.
they'll be power washed or, I know that the narrative talks about measures will be taken to ensure that invasives are not transported, but I think we need a little more detail.
More specificity, okay.
Which will have contractor specification as well.
Okay,
All right, so we may see on the 4th or the 18th.
all right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to our next application. Notice of intent, 99 Dalton Road, DEP file number 137-1594. And was it David with us this evening?
Yes, hello.
Good evening.
Thank you. For the record, my name is David Cowell. I'm a senior wetland scientist with Hancock Associates here tonight on behalf of the applicant, the homeowner, Dan McIntyre, and his wife. Also with us tonight, we have Honeycomb Design. We have Risa Gray, I think your name is, and she is on the design team. Do I have the ability to share screen and pull up the site plan? Let's see. Where is it? Oh. Bear with me. I think I have too many windows open. Let's try this again. All right, share. Okay. Well, I have two plans open. I'll start with the first one. This is the application as we had submitted it.
Just in the interest of time, I think we can just go to the current plan.
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yep. Can you guys see the current plan as I switched over?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so this is the current plan. that's fine. So this is the opening public hearing. I don't anticipate that the hearing will close tonight. I think that this is more of a exploratory, introducing the project to the Conservation Commission and requesting some feedback on some of the elements that we've detailed here. So there's an existing single-family home. The proposal is to do some pertinent additions to the single-family home located within the buffer zone to bordering vegetated wetland. I'll start with the wetland delineation. The wetland delineation, just a bit of a challenge in the context that the extent of hydric soils actually occurs over what is and has been for a very long time manicured turf lawn. So at the edge of lawn, it's clearly bordering vegetated wetland based on vegetation. It's primarily dominated by silky dogwood, but the extent of hydric soils was delineated using a soil auger. So the wetland line, if you guys can see my cursor, actually comes up across the lawn, and so we can revisit that. But the elements of construction that we'd like to do. There's a proposed garage at the front of the house located in the 100-foot buffer zone. This is primarily located over the existing driveway, so it doesn't necessarily represent a significant increase in impervious surface area. It's bituminous concrete below. There's a small area that I think jogs out onto some lawn, so that is a small increase of impervious surface area. There's a proposed covered deck or covered porch on the front of the house, and a proposed walkway that comes out over what exists as lawn today and just goes out to the driveway in the front of the garage there. The other elements are to take there's an existing non-conforming wooden deck. This wooden deck exists. Let me show the 50-foot no build line is this line here that you can see actually bisects through the house itself. So some of the house exists today as existing non-conforming, having been constructed prior to enactment of the Wetlands Protection Act and the Concord local bylaws. The proposal is to take this existing wooden deck and do an in-kind transition or conversion into a screened porch. So the proposal would be within the exact in-kind footprint of the wooden deck and transition it into a screened porch at this location. There's also a proposal to install another second screened porch on the side of the house. This is worth a discussion and deliberation. This again occurs within the 50-foot no build zone. Colleen and I had the opportunity to visit this site last week. Our original delineation from the flag A104 actually went straight back to the side of the property, but as Colleen and I were out there probing, taking soil probes for extent of hydric soils, there still is some hydric soils up here, and we revised our flag to continue off here to flag 105R. That's a revised 105 flag, and this is flag 106. So as previously detailed in our plan, the 50-foot no build zone occurred just outside. We had designed the porch to occur outside of the 50-foot no build zone. Again, it's a tricky wetland based on hydric soils within manicured lawn. There is, around where my cursor is now, there's a sump pump discharge that we didn't locate on our site plan. So that is a sort of unnatural contributing factor to adding water to this area, but that's neither here nor there. The extent of hydric soils is still found at this spot. And then the last element of construction we've detailed here is infiltration to account for the additional surface area. We would be converting the house from, right now, I believe drainage is conventional gutters and downspouts that afford surface drainage. We would be encapsulating rainfall over the roof runoff and putting that into some storm scepter infiltration trenches and basins below surface over here. So I wanted to get some feedback on the Conservation Commission. I understand that having been in front of Concord before, that you guys do not take waiver requests for construction in the 50-foot no build zone lightly. Some supporting factors here is that again, the wooden deck here is existing non-conforming structure that we're hoping to go up on. The proposed deck on the side of the house, it's proposed over what exists as manicured lawn, so there's no need for clearing of native vegetation. There's really no associated grading. The screen porch here would be on sonotubes or helical piles, affording some infiltration beneath it. It's not going to be on a concrete slab. And I wanted to engage the Conservation Commission in dialogue about making these waiver requests, what our likelihood would be of obtaining waiver to construct these areas in the 50-foot no build zone, and what opportunities we have for compensatory mitigation that we can offer the commission in terms of wetland restoration. You know, I noticed that there's, among the silky dogwoods, there's a few different invasive species that we could treat. We can, you know, increase vegetative cover with a native planting plan. With that, I'll ask the commission if you guys can afford us feedback. Not all at once. Do you mind if I query, if we just go around the table with the commission members, vocalizing thoughts, feedback, concerns?
Okay. David, can you hear us?
Yes, who's this?
This is Ed, the chair.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good.
Okay, there we go. So certainly covering the wood deck, the existing wooden deck, and it's going to just cover the existing wooden deck as it sits today, correct?
Yes, exactly. In-kind footprint with no expansion. It would be directly over the wooden deck as it is.
Okay, so I don't think that's an issue, as it's an existing wooden deck. Have you given any thought of the new wooden deck as facing the plan from the rear of the house to the right of the house, of pushing that back any further out of the 50-foot no build?
Yeah, that's actually I can work with our design team and civil engineer to see if that one of the things that I don't have the benefit of is the floor plan of the house and why the deck is located where it is, and understanding whether or not there's opportunity to further vacate the 50-foot no build zone and still have a viable you know, porch there that fits with the floor plan of the house and doesn't encumber, you know, utilities or things of that nature. So
Yeah.
That's certainly something I'd be very happy to reevaluate and appraisal ahead of the next hearing.
Yeah, I can tell you that the precedent that the NRC has done in the past is that if there's an existing wooden deck on the house and it's a certain distance from the wetlands, in this case, it looks like maybe that corner is clipped by the 25.
The 25, the 25 foot occurs at the very corner of the house there. So that is coincident with the 25 foot no disturb zone, that corner of the home or corner.
Yeah. And it does appear that your proposed new deck is further back than the existing deck, if I'm reading the plans correctly.
Yes, that was a point I wanted to make, but you're correct. That it's no closer than existing non-conforming.
Dave, if you can put on the plan, the closest point of encroachment under existing conditions and the closest point of encroachment under proposed. So if it's 25.0 now and it's 25.5 feet away under proposed, that's helpful for us to understand.
Yeah. I think we have a much clearer path at that point, understanding that the proposed new deck is no closer. And ideally, you know, as far back as you can get it would be appreciated for you to take a look at.
Okay.
And then as far as this, the storm tech chambers, which is a great way of, managing the stormwater. I know that too is in the 50, but it does have a compelling reason to be there in terms of managing the stormwater effectively.
Yes.
I don't know how the other commissioners feel about that.
Yeah, that was based on, we did perk testing to ensure that it would actually infiltrate and that it wouldn't be, in the groundwater table and not infiltrate. And it's a subsurface structure that we would bury it, backfill it to existing grade, loam and seed it, and it would be vegetated at surface. It would be below surface once installed.
Yeah, and again, the 50-foot no build as revised really doesn't, allow for structures than that, but it may be by way of stormwater management may be acceptable. Gary, do you have any thoughts on that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is, I agree with Ed that it's great to have the stormwater management. Could the stormwater management be achieved outside the 50? That would be a question. So maybe an alternatives analysis or something like that around that to see if we could achieve some of that stormwater protection outside the 50. But if you demonstrate that you can't, then I think that would be a mitigating factor that we would consider.
Okay. Yeah, that's unfortunately our representative civil engineer couldn't attend tonight because he has a conflicting hearing in Wellesley. These are comments that I can go back and ask him for that alternatives analysis. Had he been in attendance, he may already have an answer that it failed to perk further away or some design constraints. So certainly
Dave,
questions I can.
You saw that CPW engineering has reviewed the design, and one of their questions was whether or not town staff had witnessed the soil testing.
Right, Jacob had prepared a written response letter answering these questions.
Okay.
He provided me with a copy of it. I don't know if he had sent or copied the commission in his responses to the.
Yes, it's on our website.
Yeah, we got that.
Yep, I think it was received either today or yesterday, and likely without enough time for the commission to review his engineering responses. So again, I can get these answers from him ahead of next hearing, and perhaps you guys will have opportunity to review his response to comments memo.
Yeah, no, I think we did see that. Thank you. And but CPW would have to respond to that, right, in terms of his commentary, right? I would think that's the next piece of that. And I think that just one small point, I think adjacent to the drive, there's there's a tree right on the backside of that. I think the new pullout, if you will, to the left-hand side above the stormwater.
This one here?
Yeah, it looks like there's that one right there. It looks like there's some grading happening around that. So how would you protect that, or what steps would you take to make sure that that remains in good health?
We have we could protect the tree. We could either corral it during construction to ensure that tapered grading doesn't impair the root structure of that tree. And that's again, I can evaluate that tree in particular and prepare responses for the next hearing.
Okay. I didn't have any other comments. Okay. All right. Nick?
I had one, just we didn't discuss the mitigation for the additional deck, right? So just to make that clear. So there was a suggestion from staff for possibly some removal, some of the lawn and that's inside the 25 and replacing it with some sort of plantings, wetland or appropriate plantings.
Yes, so unfortunately my client is between a rock and a hard place to the extent that he's had, I look back at aerial satellite imagery as far back as it goes to on Google Earth, just to the, early 1990s. And I understand that lawn has been maintained there for a long time. I think that he's willing to reclaim an extent of his lawn and provide that as restored, with a native planting plan to restore it. But there is some concern that if he were to vacate lawn entirely to the 25-foot no disturb, it would be forested outside of his back deck that he has no lawn whatsoever. So I would
Hey,
ask the commission.
We're not asking for that. We're just.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Requirements within the 100-foot are 1-to-1 mitigation for new impervious. And within the 50, it's 10-to-1. So those are the numbers that you need to work with.
Okay. All right. Now that's based on surface area. Is that what you would look for in surface area of restoration replication per square foot of impact?
Correct.
Okay, great. Yep.
Can I just ask about the screened porch? Would you have to change the base, the post going into the ground? I mean, is it going to be a lot heavier?
No, I guess that would be a question. I don't know if Reese is able to answer that. I understand that it's still designed to be on sonotubes or helical piers without a concrete foundation. I don't know specifically whether or not the existing piers that are in there would need to be replaced.
I can speak to that. They would, they're currently not, they're not sized to code, so we wouldn't need to bring them up to code. They're only 4-inch posts. They need to be 6.
So would you have to provide a new foundation for that?
New footing, not just in replacement in
footing.
kind though. No, not a foundation.
Okay.
So yeah, I would envision removing the existing post. The hole may need to be enlarged from 4 feet to 6 feet diameter holes to set the sonotubes to build it according to spec.
So so it would be good to have a detail of that on the plan as well. But there's
Yep,
no
we can do that.
proposed in the area of jurisdiction. All right.
Great.
Let me go out and ask if there's any public comment regarding this application.
Dave, can you stop your share, please?
Oh, yeah. Yep. There we go.
No, I don't see.
Okay, doesn't appear to be any. So we'll continue this if you're good with that.
Yeah, I appreciate the feedback. That's exactly what we're looking for is, just a punch list of items we'd need to address prior to the next hearing in the matter. Do I understand that you guys are looking for submittals ahead of the next hearing this Friday in 2 days?
Yeah, by this Friday, and also depending on responses from CPW, I'm sure that'll be
Right. Okay.
Right. I mean, they haven't.
Yeah, they've already have it.
They'll need some time.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I would say that based on my work schedule, I'm not working on Friday and I'm committed all day tomorrow. That I wouldn't have the ability to get together with my civil engineer to turn these revisions around in a 48-hour period. So it may be out next week. And
What do you need to be 18th?
yeah, is that the second hearing coming up? That's
Second hearing. Yeah. Yeah.
that would be May 18th. Is that the date?
May 18th.
Very good. I'll save my, I'll add that to my calendar.
Very good.
So thanks for the feedback. I think that gives us our marching orders and some direction in the additional information we need to procure and provide to the commission for you to make your assessment.
Great.
So the submittals for the May 18th meeting are due May 6th.
Okay, May 6th, submittal date. Wonderful.
Thank you, Delia.
All right.
Good clarification. All right. Thank you, David.
All right. Yep. I imagine you guys administratively will continue. Thank you. All right. Be well, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care. All right. The next application is a notice of intent, 25 Warner Street, DEP file number 137-1599. And who is here this evening to discuss that with us?
Hello.
Ah,
Dave Crossman with B&C Associates representing the applicant James Smith.
Good evening, David.
Evening. The site is a duplex and Mr. Smith owns the right half of the duplex. And testing your memory, the left half of this duplex was approved last summer for the proposed addition. And Mr. Smith would like to almost mirror that, with the exception of the 100-year floodplain. He's going to angle the slab and keep that outside of the 100-year floodplain. And the building itself will cantilever over the floodplain. It'll be about 1.5 feet above the floodplain.
And David, is that dash line the eave, or is that
That's the overhang.
the overhang?
But-
That's the overhang.
But it doesn't show the building overhanging the
Right.
foundation,
But the building is cantilevering over that slab.
that notch out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It should kind of show, it should show that, I think.
Oh.
But nonetheless, go ahead. Sorry, Dave. Please proceed.
So basically, that's what we're asking to approve, is the work within the buffer zone. It's outside the 50-foot buffer. And the area itself there's currently a deck there. And the rest of the area is lawn. We're not cutting down any trees or anything. We're just turning the lawn into the addition. There's no change to grades at all. It's going to be right flat on the ground.
Or
Okay.
over the ground.
So David, you did mention that the 20 feet got approved a year ago.
Yes.
So it is a little confusing that you have kind of both proposed additions on the same plan, with one being approved a year ago. I think it would be more appropriate to show this particular application for 25 without 23's proposed addition on it. So it speaks just to this particular application. And as part of that, you should note the existing decks on, the existing conditions as well.
But so the proposed addition has not been built, is that correct?
That's
Right.
correct.
Right.
Could you just put approved?
Yeah, I mean, you could just leave it, I suppose, and just put approved, addition, take off proposed, and just put addition approved under DEP file number 1550 or whatever it is.
I guess you do that. But again, you ought to show the existing conditions on 25.
Right. Right, so there's the deck and there's some
stairs off to the
structures, right.
side, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that should be on there within.
Just for the
buffer zone,
record
and
of
they
the
should-
existing.
All right.
And then Dave, you note the 100-year floodplain, has that been kind of staked in the field, or is that just kind of a close approximation, or how is that determined?
That's actually determined by survey. It has not been staked, but the survey is accurate.
Okay, so that has been surveyed. Okay.
Yeah.
Wasn't sure. All right.
Dave, are we outside the 100-foot buffer zone here? I can't
No,
tell.
the 100-foot buffer zone goes right into the existing building.
Way out there, okay.
Yeah, you can see the fifth just nipping the top of the plan here.
So is there a 50, where's the 50-foot line?
There it is, right there.
Which?
Sorry, 1 second.
There you go.
Okay, good, okay.
And Dave, the mitigation for this, what's proposed?
I guess I'd leave that up to suggestions from you. Mr. Stolazzi, who is the adjoining owner, the mitigation for his was to remove all the invasives on the lot.
Mhm.
So that's already been approved, and that doesn't leave, basically all that's there now is lawn for Mr. Smith.
So
Was it-
I would have to look back at that filing, David. I thought that the invasives removal was sort of within a discrete area, that it was not site-wide, because
That's a big site in the
that's a big
back.
site.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it went all the way in the back here.
No.
So there's got to be additional,
there may be an opportunity
yeah.
to add on to the invasives removal if that's
yeah,
a potential option.
And if the invasive removal was complete, then there's probably room for native replanting.
right. And there were replantings proposed with
Oh,
Sterlazzi's.
okay.
So
Yeah, I
those
mean,
should
it'd
also
be-
be done here too.
Helpful to know, again, if that work hasn't all been completed, including the addition, it'd be helpful to have the plans that they label what's proposed under 25 and what's proposed under 23, so we can distinguish
Yeah.
both the mitigation separately and the proposed development.
David, is this common, is this, are these two condominiums and this is common land?
They share joint ownership of the land in the back.
Okay,
Well, so are these condominiums though? Okay.
Uh,
Oh, so just
I
two.
don't think so. I think it's just two,
two
just a
halves.
duplex.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Duplexes,
So
right?
it's not common area.
Yeah.
The next question.
so if it's common, if it's owned jointly, that means there's already an order of conditions.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
There's already one order of conditions
For
on this
23,
property.
yeah.
But it's, I mean, the parcel's known as 23-25. Because it is
So
one
I'm
parcel.
curious, how does that work, Delia? Do we, a second order of conditions on the same property, a second encumbrance, or how does that?
Or different
And
address.
Yeah, I mean, we just issued, for 23, we just issued it to 23 Sterlazzi, but, you know, if either one of them sells, the property is encumbered by
Right, they both have,
now, and will be too, so.
That makes sense.
they
Yeah.
both have separate deeds on the building. So if one moves away or
Okay, well,
sells,
that's better. Okay,
Yeah.
then I
That's
think
just the building. That's just the building.
that's how it gets recorded, though.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Then that means that's good, because then Sterlazzi is responsible for his,
Yeah.
and Mr. Smith is responsible for his. And they don't overlap. So that's preferred.
Right, good, okay.
So if you could come back with obviously as part of this proposed mitigation plan, obviously maybe looking at
all right,
together out there on the ownership side.
Yep.
Okay.
as Delia knows, we have the person preparing the plan is extremely slow. So it will not be ready by Friday for the next meeting. It may not even be ready next month, but we can go to the second meeting.
All right, Dave, just hang on one second. I just want to go out for any, just to ask if there's any public comment in regard to this application. And there is not, so please proceed.
So I guess I would, on behalf of the applicant, I would like to ask for continuation to the second meeting in May. And hopefully our engineer will produce something in time for that meeting.
And I think as Delia noted on the previous application, that timeframe that it would be due would be May 6th.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you,
All
Dave.
right. Thank you.
Have a good evening. All right, so we have COC.
This certificate of compliance was for the house construction for Mr. Gillis. He has a current notice in front of you now. This is an old permit from when the house was constructed that was never closed out. So this is really just sort of housekeeping. House is there, site stable.
1986 or something like that.
1986.
Cool.
Already?
Okay.
Wow.
I remember.
Late 80s, yeah.
So I'd
Quick
be
motion.
happy to move that we close and issue a COC for 80 Alfred Circle, DEP file number 137-255.
Second,
The vote, Sarah,
aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Nick,
Hi,
and I am an I as well. All right, so that last issue of the evening, the informal discussion with The owner is Olison of 207 Prairie Street.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
This is Eric Olson for 207 Prairie Street.
Good evening.
So, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to share my screen. If that's all right.
That's fine, yeah.
All right. Can you guys see the presentation?
Ken, yes.
All right, perfect. All right, so, well, first of all, thank you all in advance. I know this is an informal discussion, but it's going to help kind of shape my thought process moving forward and what might need to happen. So just kind of set the stage. I live on Prairie Street at 207. Me and my wife and my two young kids, we built this house in 2017 with Matt CP, a local builder in Concord. And I'll go through what it looks like, but we'd love to build a deck off the first floor of our house. It would kind of allow us to, for a family to be able to enjoy the backyard while having a place where we could kind of watch, the kids play. We don't really kind of utilize the backyard very much because we have a patio down below, but it's hard when, where it's not connected to the main floor and you have to kind of go through the basement to get out there. So unless we're all down there, we don't really utilize it to its full potential. So the proposed plan of what we're going to do, and I'll show you the map in a second, is we'd love to build a deck kind of where our current family room is and really kind of follow the same footprint as where the current patio is. So the footings would be kind of in the four corners around the patio per se. The patio is around, I just measured it, it's around 14 by 20 feet. That current patio would stay as built. It's like a permeable surface right now. The deck would be uncovered. There'd be no kind of screened in porch or anything like that. It would be roughly, I think I kind of eyeballed it, but 12 to 14 foot above where the current patio is. The big thing that we really would love to do is build steps down to the yard. And so I have kind of, where we'd kind of would envision the stairs going down, but want to, have a conversation around that. That would allow us to actually utilize the deck. And, if kids were playing down in the backyard and coming up for dinner, instead of having to go all through the house, all the way down through the basement to access that. So this is the current, when we built the house, this is the current kind of map that we have. You can see in the back here, this is where that current stone patio is off of the first floor. So that was, obviously approved when we did this, and we had to work to get the certificate of compliance on the wetlands area. But really kind of what we would be looking to do is build a deck that's in that same footprint. And then, here's kind of just, I took some images today just so you could see it. This is the patio right now. This is where we have these three windows up top above where the door is on the basement level. And we'd build kind of a door way from here to get to the deck. And then it would be in the same thing. And then in terms of where we, there's a couple of different options of if we could do stairs, but if it would be okay to run stairs down along the house, kind of towards this, there's like a storage kind of part of our basement that way. That's one thought, just so it doesn't, stick out into the backyard at all, or, get closer to that, any of the considerations that we might need to look at. Going back to the map, like there is obviously this 50-foot no build zone that I'm aware of. I don't know all the rules, so we'd have to still kind of, understand what that might look like. The other option maybe for the stairs is to go the other way if there's room here. But I'm not sure if there's, really that much wiggle room either way. But that's kind of what I just wanted to have an informal conversation with the commission about, to hear their, your guys' thoughts on, if we do proceed, we'd obviously go and work with Stamsky and McNary again to draw plans, but they recommended that we have this conversation before we start getting going.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, we see this more often than we'd like, where, a house is built, it's built hard up against the 50. And, oftentimes, at least in my tenure here, we've seen homeowners come back in and, they're hard up against the 50. They'd like to put something on a deck. And as, certainly within the 50-foot no build policy, decks aren't allowed within the 50. Because it becomes a slippery slope. Deck gets put on, once the deck gets established, then it can proceed to get covered, perhaps, filled in as an addition. Other decks can get added and so on. We try to caution builders when they come in and they're building very close to the 50 to give some more elbow room, because, it's more often than not the future homeowner will come before us and say, love to put a deck on. And we're at this very kind of inflection point that we're talking about now, which would basically say that, you at least by way of the 50-foot no build policy, you can't put a deck on because there's really no room there.
Does the patio qualify as a structure, given our policy?
It doesn't qualify as a structure. It really says patios will be considered from time to time on a case-by-case basis, but it is not qualified as a structure.
Can I ask though, on the plan, the arrow says the 50 goes all the way to the house, but it looks like the 50 line is in front of the house.
No, the 50 is this little dot here.
Oh, is it?
And then
So what's this line here then?
that line, my last one.
So which one, Sarah,
does
where are
the
you talking?
50 does the 50 go through the middle of the
That's the
current
floodplain.
section?
See, that's the flood. See the
Right.
floodplain.
So that
Yeah,
dash,
there.
That's the
dot,
floodplain.
dot, that's the floodplain.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
And then
unfortunate.
50, yeah.
See
This
the 50 level.
is the 50 right tied up against the
Okay.
house.
And then it goes hard up at a right angle, basically, on
I
the
was
lower.
thinking if it was
Yes.
the other line, we could have just a little
Right.
Yeah.
bridge or something.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's not
I mean,
gonna
what
work.
would have been, if the builder had
Yeah.
had positioned the house in the same footprint as where it had been initially, this is the existing
And there would be
dwelling that
more.
was torn down.
Yeah, or even crank the new dwelling to
even-
the upper right.
Yeah. even more
Build
this way.
setback envelope there. If we could have opened up a little
Little
wedge
bit
on the
more,
back, but
right.
it is where it is
Oh,
today.
gosh, Yeah.
So it's a difficult position for the commission as well. We certainly love to work with the homeowner in terms of trying to get you to where you'd like to be, but in this case, the house is, boy, it's
already big
inches
and
away from the
everything.
50 on those two important facades.
And I mean, the one area that's outside of the 50 seems to be the setback with your neighbor.
Yes, yeah.
I
you're
mean, is
very-
that, you can't build a structure in the setback either, right?
No. I don't, no, you
You
can't
can do a
build it.
patio.
You can do a patio, but you
at
can't do
grade,
a
but you
structure.
Can't do a deck. Talking about
On, yeah,
where-
on that, that side is,
Right.
that's
You're
off.
pretty
the
close to
garage.
the setback there.
No,
Yeah,
that's the garage.
no, it's right at the setback.
It's right at the
15 feet. And
couple
that's the
feet.
thing is, if
Yeah.
you built the structure 15 feet from the setback and 50 feet from the wetlands.
Right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't leave,
There's really no wiggle room on the plan that we can.
Even if it's like just right above the existing patio.
Yeah, because again, what happens by building a deck, next, let's say you build the deck and then you sell it to the next buyer, they'll come in and say, well, the deck's here, but I'd like to enclose the deck. And then they'll say, we also want to put a deck on this side of the house because now that deck is 38 feet from the wetlands and we can put a deck on the right-hand side, 38 feet from the wetlands. And, one bleeds into the other. So it becomes a very slippery slope for the commission.
and the patios are allowed, it's a pervious patio. And
Yeah.
so the patio is sort of acting as infiltration at ground level, not impeding habitat or stormwater. So that's why the patios are allowed, but
Yeah, I think, and I'm sure you're, frustrated by this. I think we are equally frustrated when builders come before us and they place their house hard up against the 50, and it's, again, oftentimes leads to these types of discussions, which are, difficult discussions, if you will.
Okay. All right, so probably no, is what I'm hearing. That sounds like all right, well, I guess I understand, not that, it's the ideal, but I understand that, what the considerations are, and it's just the situation I guess we're in. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Appreciate
right.
your time.
All right, thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye.
All right. Yeah, that's a tough situation. All right, I think with that, we are adjourned.
We have a permit for you to sign. Yep.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
Really?
Since we're here in person, we get to sign.
Yeah.
Me too. Remember what that was like? Oh, except for Nick.
Yeah,
You have to
yeah, yeah.
you have to come in.